कोई भी अधिकतर स्टेट गवर्नमेंट अधिकतर मामलों में, खासकर मैं झारखंड से हूं, मैं जानता हूं 99% मामलों में एनजीटी के किसी भी ऑर्डर को स्टेट गवर्नमेंट वैल्यू नहीं देती है, ओबे नहीं करती है। तो क्या इसकी जगह इन्वायरमेंटल ओम्बुड्समैन एक अच्छा विकल्प हो सकता है? इसके लिए इनिशिएटिव किया जाना चाहिए, क्योंकि नेशनल ग्रीन ट्रिब्यूनल बिल्कुल टूथलेस ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एक लगातार बनता जाता है। बस
बहुत अच्छे सवाल। Can you hold the questions? Because all very interesting outcome. Budget, whole issue about rating of chief ministers on environment and NGT. Yes. हाँ. नहीं. I have 2 women and 1 gentleman. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. My question is to Mr. Aluwalia regarding before tea break. Sir said कि हमें awareness की बात करनी चाहिए on consumption of food and all. So during the times of food insecurity, I just want to know, it is not new for the country. When it started with the Green Revolution, we used to have food. India ने progress किया production पे rather than nutritious food, which in fact Down to Earth has reported on as well. क्योंकि हमें production दिखाना था that we are fully secured in food, but not with the nutritious food. First of all that, and what about regarding during the times when Government of India decreased the finances, the budget for the Nutrition Institute of India, and then on other hand we'll say कि for nutritious food लेना चाहिए. मेरा पहला ये सवाल है. And second question to Amitabh sir, is India really ready to fill the vacuum during the times जब हमें EV mission की तरफ जाना चाहिए, जबकि China is master in every production, raw material, battery production, and we don't even have a plan to discard the batteries.
Okay, good point. Yes.
Times, I'm from Pune. My basic question is, all experts are giving viable ideas and viable planning, but when it comes to vote bank, political leaders, they don't, they accept it orally, but when it comes to implementation, they disagree. So water pricing and parking issue, as we are discussing, it is on paper in Maharashtra also, in every almost in every state, but when it comes to implementation, वो होता नहीं. So is it necessary to sensitize political leaders and local politicians who actually connecting with common people?
Good. Janto?
Janto Vasavan Telegraph, Kolkata. I have a question for Dr. Kant. You have mentioned about the governance issue in municipalities and the states, and the responsibility for the environmental mess that has been created around the country. Just I would like to know from you, sir, that India, when we look at the climate action ranking, is quite high up in the world. I think my memory goes to the German Watch report saying 7th globally. But when you look at the environmental performance report, we are virtually at the bottom 176 or something of that sort. Have we failed to mainstream climate action in the environmental action in the country? Are we going for the market-driven and mitigation-driven climate action so the rest of the environment seems to be getting compromised? And also, if you look at the just released report that in the SDG, India has actually slipped in the last year, 109 or something of the sort. So how do you see this? And what is the way out of this kind of apparent discord between the environmental action and the climate action?
Okay, very interesting questions have been asked. I'm going to leave it, I think, some very important things, and I will ask Amitabh actually for you to start first. And then I will come to Raj and Montek for the final flourish.
उन्होंने तो बड़ा ही कॉम्प्लेक्स एक सवाल पूछा था जिसको कि मेरे गुरुजी केवल आंसर कर सकते हैं. ये एनजीटी को क्या ऑम्बुड्समैन में बदल दिया जाए, बहुत ही कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी जो सवाल है और मेरे में इतना ज्ञान है नहीं, तो मैं touch upon the question which was asked about whether we can fill the vacuum. देखिए मेरा जो विश्वास है कि in the long run technology race is never won by the one who starts the initial disruption. The race has just begun. आप अगर ये देखिएगा कि जिसने इंटरनेट शुरू किया था लाइक ऑसबॉर्न ने, ही डिड नॉट विन द रेस, गूगल वन द रेस. जिसने लैपटॉप शुरू किया था उसने रेस नहीं जीती, एप्पल ने रेस जीती लॉन्ग टर्म में. तो अभी तो टेक्नोलॉजी डिस्ट्रप्शन शुरू हुए हैं और मेरे विचार से कि lithium battery is not the final solution. There are many other technologies, aluminum, sodium, etc. will come in, and Indians should innovate a lot in many of these new areas of growth. और बट एक चीज़ मेरे दिमाग में बड़ा क्लियर है कि हमारे देश में करीब 72% शहरें 2 व्हीलर्स पर चलती हैं. अगर हम 2 व्हीलर्स ना केवल मैन्युफैक्चर करते हैं बट एक्सपोर्ट करते हैं. अगर पूरा मार्केट दुनिया का बदल रहा है और वो इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स पे जा रहा है, तो अगर हम इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स पर नहीं शिफ्ट करेंगे तो हम अपनी पूरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग दुनिया में खो देंगे. इसलिए हमें इलेक्ट्रिक मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का चैंपियन बनना ज़रूरी है और ना केवल 2 व्हीलर्स 3 व्हीलर्स. और हमारा जो साइज और स्केल है इंडिया का, वो आपको डोमेस्टिक मार्केट देता है. चाइना में क्या होता है, वो पहले दुनिया के मार्केट के बारे में सोचते हैं, एक्सपोर्ट के बारे में. हम अपने डोमेस्टिक मार्केट के लिए सोचते रहते हैं. तो हमारे जो 2 व्हीलर्स और 3 व्हीलर्स के मैन्युफैक्चरर्स हैं, अगर ये दुनिया में के बारे में सोचें और एक्सपोर्ट पेनिट्रेशन के बारे में सोचेंगे, क्योंकि कई लोग करने लगे हैं, ये आपका ओला, एथर, ये बहुत बढ़िया 2 व्हीलर्स बना रहे हैं. और उन्होंने फोर्स किया, स्टार्टअप्स ने फोर्स किया कि बजाज और टीवीएस भी इलेक्ट्रिक 2 व्हीलर्स बनाए. तो इस समय सबने बनाना शुरू किया और मार्केट में बड़ा कंपटीशन चल रहा है इसके लिए. 4 व्हीलर्स में टाटाज ने रेस शुरू की अपनी इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स के साथ. जो महिंद्रा की जो नई कार्स आई हैं, ये मेरे विचार से, और मैंने ट्रायल रन के बाद में कह रहा हूँ, ये टेस्ला की गाड़ियों से अच्छी गाड़ी है, जिसमें इंटीग्रेशन ऑफ IoT विद ऑटोमोटिव इंजीनियरिंग हुआ है. और टेस्ला जब इंडिया में आएगी, ये इस प्राइस पॉइंट पर वो मैच नहीं कर पाएगी. तो मेरा जो विचार है कि इंडिया को दिखाना चाहिए कि इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल के क्षेत्र में 2 व्हीलर्स, 3 व्हीलर और 4 व्हीलर्स में हम ग्लोबल चैंपियंस बनेंगे और बन सकते हैं. दूसरा कि जब हम ये मैन्युफैक्चरिंग करते हैं, हमें कंपोनेंट मैन्युफैक्चरिंग उसकी आवश्यक है और बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग उसकी आवश्यक है. बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के लिए करीब 100 गीगावाट बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग अनाउंस हो चुकी है. मारुति सुजुकी, मारुति, टाटाज, ये आपके जो एग्जिस्टिंग बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरर्स हैं, ये सब जा रहे हैं इलेक्ट्रिक लिथियम बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के लिए. और मेरे विचार से ये 3-4 साल के अंदर हम बैटरी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में भी क्वांटम जंप लगाएंगे. और मेरा अपना विचार है कि ये वैक्यूम कोई और देश नहीं कर सकता, केवल इंडिया कर सकता है, क्योंकि साइज और स्केल इंडिया में है. दूसरी चीज़ जो हमें मेरे विचार से करनी बहुत आवश्यक है, क्योंकि क्लाइमेटिकली ब्लेस्ड बहुत कम देश हैं. इंडिया रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी के लिए क्लाइमेटिकली ब्लेस्ड है, और जो क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस इंडिया में हैं वो केवल सऊदी अरेबिया में है और 1-2 लैटिन अमेरिकन छोटी कंट्रीज में है और कहीं नहीं है. तो हमने क्या किया है कि ना केवल 200 गीगावाट रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी की है, पर 24 रुपए से 2 रुपए तक हम उसका प्राइस गिरा सके हैं. और वो हुआ है 2 कारणों से. एक तो भारत एक अकेला देश है जहाँ एक ग्रिड है पूरे देश में. ये यूरोप में भी नहीं है, अमेरिका में भी नहीं. तो जो आप रिन्यूएबल पावर प्रोड्यूस करते हैं साउथ में, तमिलनाडु में या गुजरात में, वो आप ट्रांसमिट कर पाते हैं। दूसरा, भारत ने एक पॉलिसी इनिशिएटिव लिया था जिसमें कि स्टेट गवर्नमेंट, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट और आरबीआई ने एक मैकेनिज्म शुरू किया कि अगर डिस्कॉम पे नहीं करता तो आरबीआई वो डिडक्ट करता है। ये पॉलिसी इनिशिएटिव है जिसकी वजह से जो रिन्यूएबल एनर्जी सेक्टर इंडिया में डेवलप हुआ वो सारा प्राइवेट सेक्टर में हुआ और प्राइवेट इक्विटी और वेंचर कैपिटल आया इसमें। ये सारा प्राइवेट इनिशिएटिव से हुआ, ये गवर्नमेंट ने नहीं किया। तो मेरे विचार से प्राइवेट सेक्टर ने दिखाया कि ये वायबल मार्केट है, क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशंस हैं, आप रिन्यूएबल कर सकते हैं और लो प्राइस में कर सकते हैं। और रिन्यूएबल आपने कर दिया, मेरे विचार से तो 2030 का जो हमारा टारगेट है 500 का, हमें एम करना चाहिए कि हम 750 गीगावाट करेंगे 2030 तक। और हमें ये इस समय एम्बिशन दिखा के और क्या क्या पॉलिसी इनिशिएटिव ले सकते हैं वो करना चाहिए। तीसरी चीज कि हम करीब 180 बिलियन का फॉसिल फ्यूल इंपोर्ट करते हैं, 180 बिलियन का, ये हमारा सबसे बड़ा इंपोर्ट है। हम जब रिन्यूएबल प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, मैं 750 गीगावाट इसलिए कह रहा हूं क्योंकि भारत का जो लक्ष्य होना चाहिए कि वो रिन्यूएबल को उपयोग करके पानी को क्रैक करके ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन बनाए, क्योंकि ये फ्यूल ऑफ द फ्यूचर है ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन। और ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन इस समय $4.5 पर है पर किलोग्राम। हमारा लक्ष्य होना चाहिए, हम $4.5 पर प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, पर अमेरिका की क्लाइमेटिक कंडीशन में वो $7.5 पर प्रोड्यूस करते हैं। $7.5 पर वो इन्फ्लेशन रिडक्शन एक्ट के थ्रू वो सब्सिडाइज करते हैं और उनकी सब्सिडी बहुत ज़्यादा है और हमें इतनी सब्सिडी देने की आवश्यकता नहीं है। और हमारा लक्ष्य होना चाहिए कि 2030 तक हम ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन $1 पर ले आए, साइज और स्केल इंडिया का उपयोग करके। और ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन के हम दुनिया के चीपेस्ट प्रोड्यूसर बने, लार्जेस्ट प्रोड्यूसर बने और हम बिगेस्ट एक्सपोर्टर बने और हम इलेक्ट्रोलाइजर जिससे ये बनता है उसके बहुत बड़े मैन्युफैक्चरर बने। तो हम क्लीन एनर्जी, ना केवल भारत को ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन जो क्लीन एनर्जी है उससे चला पाएंगे, बल्कि हम ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन से को एक्सपोर्ट करेंगे उसके लिक्विड फॉर्म एमोनिया में, और हम एक्सपोर्टर बनेंगे क्लीन एनर्जी के। तो हम फॉसिल फ्यूल्स, और ये संभावना किसी और देश में नहीं है जो कि भारत में है। तो ये टेक्नोलॉजिकल लीपफ्रॉगिंग और पोल वॉल्टिंग होगी। और मेरे विचार से हमारा लक्ष्य बड़ा क्लियर होना चाहिए कि हम ये करके दिखाएंगे 2030 तक। थैंक यू।
Thank you, Amitabh. Very interesting. Raj, you want to add anything to the questions that were asked? Any point you want to make? Please.
Not very much, but जितने भी यहाँ सवाल उठे हैं, basically they are all pointing towards one sense, which is कि okay, problems identify हो रही हैं. We have issues of pollution, we have issues of water management, we have issues of governance issues and things like that. So the hunger and the anxiety is basically कि अच्छा solution क्या है? How are we going to really address these? And that is the challenge, really speaking. अब हम identify करते हैं कि okay, the municipal governance is at a low ebb. How do you actually raise it to a point where they are able to competently manage cities? This is exactly the challenge that is there that needs to be addressed. There are different players involved. There is, of course, the political leadership, there is the administrative leadership, there is the citizenry. All three have to somehow or the other coalesce and be able to find a solution to address. Citizen की need है, the institutional framework is available, etc. Now strengthen वो कैसे होएगा, structure वो कैसे होएगा, those are the questions that we have to raise and we have to find answers. I mean, we don't have all the answers अभी तक, so basically it's a quest to get the solutions. First, to get the sensitivity of these deficits in the widest possible cross-section of people, both the players and the administrators. And secondly, that to be able to cooperate and find that the solutions that are provided or are given, etc., are implemented honestly and sincerely. That is really the purpose of this whole conversation here. While we have been able to identify the problems, we really don't have all the answers at this point of time. It's a search for answers that, in this whole environment, that is our mandate, or shall we say, our requirement for moving ahead.
Thank you, Raj. Very wise words. Montek. Montek, one issue that was raised was, the whole issue of cities and the power of the local leadership there. And, a lot was done initially to bring in the amendments to strengthen both the village leadership as well as the city leadership. Do you see that work as sort of unfinished work, something that we need to do more? Because a lot of the conversation today has been around cities. But frankly, the power of the mayor in an Indian city versus the power of the mayor anywhere else is very different. Richard, very burning, otherwise I've got orders from Chupannu to wind up. Bolo.
Only a good idea to wind up if you've got orders.
I've got orders. But Richard,
Running into other
Richard,
time.
quickly.
So quickly, just to add to the question,
Ah.
this municipalities, the local governance,
Richard को mic चाहिए.
and
कोई mic दे Richard
all this
को.
issue, but this new challenge of getting the development authorities in place of the elected local governments. Has that worked actually? Like the Delhi Development Authorities or many other authorities like that, which are not within the framework of local governance.
So city government, and do you see that as an
Yeah,
unfinished
no,
agenda?
let me thank everybody for educating me. I found this discussion very interesting. I'm not going to sum up, I'm just using this opportunity to make what is called a concluding statement. I think one of the most intellectually lazy things that we traditionally do is to blame things on implementation. I mean, when I was in the planning commission, many friends in industry would say, "आपके plan तो बहुत बढ़िया है, लेकिन implementation is bad." Now, actually, that is not correct. When a plan doesn't get translated, it's not implementation. It could be that it was badly designed, infeasible to begin with, chose the wrong instruments to achieve a given objective, was never actually monitored, so you don't know what's happening. And all of these things ultimately are called implementation failures. They are a way of explaining the fact that we paint beautiful slogan pictures, and what happens is totally different. And so we say the fact that we painted these pictures means we had a plan, and the implementation is flawed. Actually, politicians love this because that can be blamed on the bureaucracy. हमने तो plan बनाया, आप लोगों ने implement नहीं किया. Actually, we need much greater clarity. First of all, I mean, slogans are important all over the world, and we should have slogans. But then each slogan must be translated into a pretty concrete, quantifiable objective. What is the objective? I mean, for example, in the case of renewable energy, the objective is by 2030, so many gigawatts of renewable capacity consisting of so much solar, so much wind. That's a very quantifiable objective. And at the end of the day, one will be able to say, well, you said you would achieve this objective, did you or didn't you? Now, the second thing is, how are you going to achieve that objective? One way of conceiving the problem is, have you got the right policy framework? I mean, for example, are you going to say that this is going to be achieved by the private sector, or is it going to be achieved by the government? This is a very fundamental thing. Because if it is to be achieved by the government, you must ask, where's the money coming from? If it's being achieved by the private sector, you must ask, have the conditions, if you like, the policy environment made it possible for the private sector to respond? If they haven't, then it's not a failure of implementation, it is bad design. And I think most of the things we at least my experience, and I'm not commenting on the last 10 years because I haven't been inside government, but I can say this used to happen earlier. My suspicion is that it continues. Most civil servants, if asked by the Prime Minister to call a civil servant and say, "Give me our Olympic medals बहुत कम है, must be increased from X to Y." Ministry of Sports will immediately come forward and say, "Yes, we will have a national Olympic medal winning Yojana." What does that mean? I will decide what to do, you give me this much money. And then you go to the finance ministry and they will say, in the old days, they will say, first go to the planning commission, and we would stick our foot in, raise some questions, then planning commission would go to finance ministry. In the end, the guy would get about half of what he said he wanted. It's not clear, by the way, that he deserves the full amount. But it's also not clear whether the guys who gave him half actually worked out, is it possible? And then he would implement a mission based on that. I mean, a lot of these smart cities make Mumbai into Shanghai, all that. I mean, this has been going on for so long. I think we need to be clear. What is it when you're changing the policy? Like, for example, way back in 1991, when we said abolish import control on a whole lot of things and free the exchange rate. That was a policy. Nobody, I mean, the other approach could have been that हमारी export नहीं है, we will start a new dynamic export expansion yojana in the commerce ministry, which would mean subsidy and they would come forward along. We didn't do that. We said the problem is you're not letting the private sector function, get rid of these controls. And I think it worked quite well. So even today, you have to first ask, is this being implemented by government or is it being implemented by the private sector? If it is the private sector, please talk to the private sector. Is the system working? You know, sometimes you get something in between, like for example, renewable energy. Now what we've got on renewable energy, we have the technology, lots of stuff coming up, lots of private sector guys who want. The big fault is they don't believe that the distribution companies will pay them. Because we're running a system that is broke on the distribution side. I think we've solved it in a sensible way. I approve of that. The Solar Electricity Corporation, what it has done is taken on the risk. Okay. A lot of people think that this is a permanent solution. It isn't. Because if the distribution companies keep failing, it just means the government of India will be burdened in saving SECI. Because SECI has to pay the generator. And if they're not getting the money, if the distributors aren't giving them the money, well, where are they going to get it from? But it started the process, and we've got a whole lot of fellows who are now, at least nobody can say that Indian private sector can't run a solar plant, can't put up a solar plant, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
I think, but the crux of it really is, and this is where I come to my solution. I think we are running an electricity pricing regulatory system that is broke. I think our regulators should not be allowed to declare regulatory assets. If a generator is not paid, what these guys do is they say, okay, you're due this money, we'll call it a regulatory asset. You can earn, you can charge on future power on the basis of the rate of return you should be earning on this asset, which really means you have financed the loss. Okay? That's not the way to run a private sector system. So the first policy thing is, great, we've set up the SEC, let us privatize distribution. I'm firmly of the view that we should do that. And by the way, Sheila Dixit did it in Delhi, and it's worked extremely well. Okay? And if I may say so, this may look anti-Kejriwal, and I have no intention of being anti-Kejriwal, good man in many ways. Sheila Dixit said to me that you were the one recommending that we should privatize Delhi. We privatize Delhi, the tariffs are being set by a regulator. And Mr. Kejriwal, when he won the election against Mrs. Dixit, he won it on the grounds. ये इतना charge कर रहे हैं power के लिए. Look at UP next door. UP is charging 1/3. And Sheila went around saying, but UP is charging 1/3, but they're having power cuts of 18 hours a day. Do you want me to charge 1/3 and have power cuts? But people didn't think about them. They just kicked her out. Maybe they kicked her out for other reasons. But I think we must be very clear that if if a guy gets up and says, I am going to privatize the distribution system, are you fellows going to write editorials in support or against? My guess is most of you will write against. Don't expect the politician to say privatize. In my view, if you don't privatize, you will not get a decent decent supply system. I was recently in Ahmedabad when I was talking to these torrent guys, and they run some of the private Ahmedabad and Surat and others and so on. And they said the experience is excellent. I mean, in Bhiwandi, for example, which is Maharashtra, they got the franchise to run the thing as a private thing, and it's working beautifully. Losses are down from whatever 50% to 8%, and it's profitable. And one person said, but they said, sir, what has happened? Because we have been so efficient, we have become a benchmark for the Gujarat public sector distribution company, which has also improved, which is good. So I said, fine, don't privatize the whole thing. Let every state privatize half the distribution system and let it become a basis for judging. And if the private sector does a good job, the public sector will also do the same thing. And in a way, they will use that as a political support against political interference. Because when political interference takes place, they will say, why are you doing it here? But without privatization, it won't. Now, I don't see anything in the state of India's environment recommending that. So the next one, I would recommend come clean and say what you want. And this notion that the public will not stand for it, this is utter nonsense.
So let me
finish.
wrap up. Okay,
Let me finish.
you finish.
I'm finishing. When you start letting the private sector run hotels,
Yes.
I have never heard of anybody saying, I don't want to go there, there's only the Ramada Hotel or there's the Radisson Blue. If it had been Ashoka Hotel, I would have gone. No one says that. Nobody misses the public sector in this area. I don't think anyone misses public sector Air India also. Air India hasn't got to the standard that Vistara has achieved, but hopefully they will. So, frankly, we are missing these things out, and we are expecting too much from government-run programs. There is a role for government-run programs, no question about it. But I think the idea that everything is going to be done by the government is fundamentally wrong. And I am not sure how many. Let me now pose to you. I have to get something out of this meeting. On this issue, those who agree with me, please raise your hands, and those that don't agree with me, don't raise your hands.
I agree with you on privatizing hotels.
Your audience doesn't.
So let me.
If I were a politician, let me put it another way. If I was a politician and asked me, you test all this out, and if you get at least half the hands, I will say so.
Say
You will look at this and say, forget it. I'm not saying. Keep getting the lousy service you're getting. That's it.
No, I think Montek, let me wrap up now, because I think we have a very interesting discussion. And clearly there are differences, but I would argue that they're not that wide, okay? It's, Montek talked about the need to change approaches, and to me that's the big fundamental issue. I can see the system is broken not because of the lack of intention, the lack of policy, we need to change approach. So I totally agree, Montek, with that position. Now where the difference becomes is the only issue privatization versus public, or is it a combination of the two? And I think there also, Montek and we are basically saying it's not a mantra, but it clearly is something which will help to move the needle. To me, the issue then becomes how do you make sure that public policy objectives are met? And that's where the issue also came up. Can you cross-subsidize? Can you make sure that the poorest still get their need for water? They get the free bus that the woman can use now to get to work in hot times. So all that is part of a process in which you account for the poorest and the public need of the poorest. So it's not a simple mantra to say privatize the bus. The mantra is about making sure that public service is maintained. So I think that's where the complexity of it is. My only argument with both of you would be that it's not as simple as one or the other. We, in our conversation, are very clear that privatization, there is nothing wrong with privatization. Okay? Most of us would argue that a lot of these services need to be privatized. But then we would also argue with you that the system for regulatory controls has to be strong, the governance, the monitoring has to be strong, and the public purpose of the service has to be maintained. I think if that is the case, and my only plea to all of you is, if all that is done, you still have to look at a different approach. And I want to end with saying Swati, right? Swati, I apologize. I threw out an idea, and that's, the kind of thing that I should not have done. So I threw out an idea which is very dear to me, which is a wood-based economy, where I'm basically arguing that we should grow wood to cut it and to regrow it and build an economy, a change. Now Swati came to me saying, how can you say something like that? That will lead to, and two more people in the room came. I'm sorry, I threw out the idea without explaining. Obviously, I'm not meaning pristine forests, but I'm also supporting many of the ideas from here to say we will need to come up with a better land use so that a lot of the land that we have, which is not used productively, can move towards it, and how do we make sure that local communities benefit. So I just wanted to make the point that I'm sorry I threw out the idea without explaining it. There's a lot more to it, and maybe we'll get a chance to discuss it as well. But I want to end this with Vibha. Vibha, I wanted to, because you have a captive audience here, you won't get it in the thing. So we have a treat for you now. We have a first, what do you call it, a biodiversity lunch planned for you, which Vibha has curated. Vibha does books on what is called first food, which is we are looking at recipes that work for nutrition, biodiversity, and livelihoods. So, Vibha, thank you.
So, from all this food for thought to simple food, we are going to serve you a very special lunch, which is called Servings from the Green Kitchen. So, what is Green Kitchen? Green Kitchen is a show that is produced by Down to Earth, and in which it's a show that celebrates the link between nature, nutrition, and livelihood, as the tagline goes. And in that, we talk about local and seasonal foods, which are not only good for us, but also good for the environment. These are maybe some of the foods that would be available at the times of climate change, when nothing else is easily available. So the menu that we have curated is very.
Want me to read it out?
No, I remember it. Okay. So the menu is very special, and in which we have tried to bring to you whatever we have talked about in the Green Kitchen. So we have had 3 seasons of the Green Kitchen. The first season was mostly about tree-borne foods, and that included foods like kathal, which is huge, which has got really huge and large fruits which can sustain a large family for maybe a week. So that is something that one should depend on. We also talked about multi-purpose trees such as the moringa tree. We have a raita prepared out of moringa leaves this time, and that is, again, you can have its leaves, you can have its fruits, you can also have its stalks. So it's a multi-purpose tree. We have recipes using things like amla, which can grow very easily in arid areas, and specifically this is very interesting because it's high in nutrition everyone wants, because the less you eat and you get the sufficient nutrition, that's good for the body. So we have a rasam that has been prepared with amla and also with turmeric rhizomes. We have talked about things like rice varieties from across the country. We had a very special season of Green Kitchen in which we invited Professor Pushpesh to talk about rice varieties from across the country. And we have things like a salad prepared out of matta rice from Kerala, which we have mixed with lemon from West Bengal, which is the Gandharaj lemon. So again, it's a mixture of things which is very interesting and brings out very interesting taste. And we have things like millets. We have prepared a sweet out of bajra, which is prepared with gur. It's called bajra ki tikki, and served with gur, which is being prepared without using any chemicals. So that is-
Everybody's mouth is watering.